You're listening to The Roots, a podcast from Minnesota AMA District 23 ARMCA. I'm your host, Jackie Reese. Let's dive deeper into what makes our district so great. This podcast was prepared by an independent contractor and may not be the views of the Board of Directors of District 23 ARMCA or any of their sponsors or affiliates. Welcome everybody to episode 32 of The Roots. Hey, a quick thank you to Fly Racing and Spring Creek MX Park before we hear from Kyle. Welcome everybody to episode 32 of The Roots, joined this week by Kyle Nelson. Kyle, how are you?
Doing good today.
Awesome. So I've had some requests for the 2021 AA Hare Scrambles champion here. Yours truly. Let's start at the beginning. How were you introduced to motorcycling?
It'd be a long time ago. I think my dad had a dual sport in his garage or in the kind of one of the sheds. They grew up on a farm, so there's lots of sheds around. So there was one in there, and I think even at a young age, before I could even ride around, I'd beg him to drive me around. And I remember hanging on to the handlebars, as a kid on probably an XR 250, something like that, an older one. And he'd give me rides. And even when he wasn't there, I'd crawl up on it and sit on it. Probably when I wasn't supposed to. Kids maybe would tip over, whatever. But then he never really rode it that much. I think he used it for chasing cattle or something like that. So then I think I was about maybe 10 years old or something like that. He got me a CT50, or CT70, excuse me, one of the step-through Hondas, those old stamp framed Hondas. So I drove that around till pretty much the wheels fell off. And then ever since then, I kind of had, farm dirt bikes, what I call farm dirt bikes. They're normally 20 years older than the current year. And, you buy them off of other family members or friends for $100 at the time. And there's normally something wrong with them. You had to fix them. And I just beat around the farm with them. So I kind of went through some bikes there. Maybe my first one after that CT70 was like a Yamaha 100. I don't even know what it was. And then a couple other ones. I think I had a KE 175 once I got a little bit older in high school, and then had some other ones. That KE 175, I ended up hitting a deer on it, going up my driveway, which is kind of a funny story. But my mom and dad they didn't like this friend I was hanging out with, so they told me be home by dark. So I just remember it. I was there and the sun was setting, and I was going up our driveway. We had a long driveway, and I was full tucked behind the handlebars. All I had was a helmet, and I had luckily long pants, but I was full tucked, wide open. And this deer jumped out. I was going about 60 miles an hour, and I hit the deer, and it was just cartwheel end for end. And by the time I come to a stop, the bike flew off one side of the road. I pulled off my helmet, and I remember coming to a stop with my hands out on the gravel roads. I had no gloves on, and gravel was pouring in my helmet. And my leg really hurt because the deer hit the wheel or the front wheel and moved the handlebars, and my leg dragged through the front brake lever and handlebars. So I was limping up to the house, and I got up there and nobody was home. So I didn't know what to do. I was a young kid, and I'm bleeding all over the kitchen, and I was I didn't want to make a mess. So I get the phone, and I was calling around trying to find my mom and dad, and I couldn't find them. So I was just sitting there, and I was pretty beat up. And then eventually my mom and dad come home. Well, then they were mad at me because they thought I got in a fight with this buddy that they didn't really like very much. And I was no, I hit a deer on the way up the driveway. They're yeah, right. So then eventually my dad went down there, and he comes back up to the house. He's yeah, there's a deer out in the field dragging its butt around because I broke its back. So that was kind of a funny story.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was going to ask, is the deer okay? But I guess not.
No, my dad went back down with the gun to put it out of its misery. So
yeah.
So we were both beat up, the deer and me.
Yeah. Well, I guess that shows you to get home a little earlier.
Yeah, no doubt.
So at some point you begin racing. Where does that start for you?
Um, yeah, so I had a bunch of like I call farm dirt bikes. And then eventually I had a neighbor that was a little bit into dirt biking and racing, and he talked me into buying this bike. So so I ended up borrowing money from my mom to pay for this dirt bike. So it was in '94. I bought a '93 CR 125. So I always consider that like my first real dirt bike because all my other ones were like the one right before that was a '79 CR 250.
Wow.
So I moved up a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I was just riding it around, and then my neighbor saw me, and one other friend like that I grew up with, Todd Sigford. He kind of talked me into. He's like, "Hey, you should try racing." I was like, "Well, what's that?" And then kind of he got me hooked up with Randy Lewis, and I would kind of consider Randy Lewis, like at the time I didn't know him very well, but afterwards I kind of considered him like my second father because he basically just took me under his wing and showed me everything about dirt biking. So it was pretty cool. So he brought me to the first dirt bike race. I had no idea what I was doing. I don't even know what I had for gear. Like like hopefully I had everything, but it was funny. That was in '94. So it was the spring of '94. Went to the first hare scramble. He basically just took me under his wing, threw me in his trailer with his other three boys, and we went racing. And he brought me to Cambridge, and he just kind of like, here's what you do, help me. He probably I think paid for everything, signed me up, everything, got me into the race. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just line up here, and then the gun goes off, and I just chase everybody. So I was in 200A and raced for whatever it was, the hour. And then when he was done, he's like, "What'd you think?" And I go, "That was the stupidest thing you could have done on a Sunday. Like, that's the worst thing you could do. Like, I am so wore out. I'm just beat." And then about half an hour later, trophies come out, and I won first place in C class. So then my story started changing.
Right.
Once I had a trophy, I was like, that wasn't so bad. So it was pretty funny. From there, Randy kept taking me to races, and I ended up working for him because he owned Woodsman Power Products in Alexandria, which was a Polaris and Honda dealer. So that's kind of where I worked there as well, and it was just a sweet gig. Like I ended up like wrenching on his and his kid's bike. Like as I was a mechanic there, I was kind of like his personal mechanic. So I ended up working on this stuff, getting it ready for races, and it was like the sweetest gig ever. Like I'd get stuff ready, load the trailer for the race weekend because we work Saturdays there at a dealership, and I was just prepping bikes. But I think for that whole next year, like he just took me in and it kind of showed me stuff, and he was just a tough old guy too. Like it still is. He just like if it's not tough, it's not enduro. And he's like, don't ever give up. And so I learned a lot of cool stuff from him, and it was just awesome. Like that next race, because I went to that first race, and then like obviously my mindset changed once I had a trophy in hand. But the next race, that one I overalled C, so then that ended my career in C class by my second race, and then raced B class the rest of that year on that same 125. And then I suppose in '96 I bought a brand new CR 125 and kept racing in 200B, and then think about '97 I pointed out, got bumped to A class, and then I won most of my 200A class that year. And then at the end of '97 I got bumped, or for '98 I got bumped to double A. And then that's kind of when it was like a bunch of us were running national enduros, or started to. That was my first one I ever did, was '98. We went down to Arizona to Wickenburg National. So I went to do that, and it was the first time I ever raced a 250, and it just kicked my butt. It was like beating me up, and I bonked so hard, and it was a tough race. So that same friend Todd, I worked with him at Polaris. So, and there was a big whiteboard, and there's like 4 or 5 of us that raced in engineering at the time. So on this whiteboard, he writes like, whose results did what. So like because that one was in February, I think, or March. It's like the next 4 or 5 months, I got to stare at this board that I just bonked. Like everybody was up here, and then Kyle was like, I don't know, like 25th in 250A class or something like that. It was horrible. So I think that made me really mad too. So, so, so I think when it finally came around to the locals, I think the first race I maybe got like third overall, which shut him up pretty quick because I beat him. And then I got a little bit better, and it was somewhere in that year I finally did my first overall, which was really cool. I was just stoked. And then at the end of that year, I won the overall state championship in '98. So that was really, really cool. So that kind of got me into it. And then the winning, I don't know, once I started the bug of winning and I really push for perfection and give it my all as much as I can. So I just kind of stayed. Like I didn't like losing, like pushing hard. Even in my older years now, it's hard to give up and stop, not push as hard.
Yeah. Yeah, you've had some hole shots this year, so I think, you got to go for it at the
Yeah.
beginning, right?
Yeah. I have some buddies I'm going to the races with, and it's almost a joke now. Like, see how many hole shots I can get. And even Gary on, Sunday at the border battle, he said, since I have the first two, if I keep them all up, he's gonna throw in another $100 at the end if I get
Nice.
them all. So
That's
now I'm
awesome.
shooting for that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And you move through the ranks quickly, year after year, moving up, moving up. Do you have any tips or pieces of advice for kids that are looking to do something similar?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people over the years ask me, like, how did you get so fast? Like, a lot of people are like, naturally talented, but there were 2 years in there that I put my head down and really rode about it, put in a lot of effort. I wouldn't say like I wasn't like training like nowadays, like people bicycling and working out and doing all that stuff because I don't know. I think I was 150 pounds and I couldn't put on any weight, and I still can't put on muscle mass. But it was like '96 and '97. In those years, I was trying to get fast because like that's when I was like looking up to the fast guys like the Craig and the Matt, like those guys were just destroying everybody. So I was looking up to them, and I wanted to get as fast as they could. So that's when I was still in like 200A, just getting in there, I think about then. So I was working at Woodsman's in Alexandria, and I bought a farm for my dad where he purchased the land for um, for a gravel pit where he was crushing gravel. That's what he did for a living. So I bought the farm from him, and I was living there, and it was a sweet setup because there was like 140 acres there and a gravel pit and front end loaders and stuff like that. So I could kind of build whatever I wanted. So I didn't build big like moto tracks because I never grew up around moto tracks, so still not good at it. But but it was a cool like out the back door of the house, like basically jump on the dirt bike, and I had a 3.5-4 mile trail, and it was really cool stuff, like old natural terrain. Like basically think of like a gravel pit that was overgrown with grass. So it's kind of like there's hills and jumps and bumps that are natural. It was just a lot of fun, and it was cool. Like there was an old shed there with I think there was an old snowmobile that somebody left in there from one of my buddies. And so we'd go into the grain shed and over the Arctic Cat and like through the barn and out the back door. That was part of the course.
Nice.
So like I would work in the day and then go home, eat something, and I'd put in a 2-hour hare scramble every night
Wow.
for the whole summer. Unless if my bike was ripped apart or I broke something, which it happened quite a bit, or I was on a pretty good maintenance schedule to try to keep my bike together because I was putting on so much time. And back in those days, it would be so amazing to see like, how many hours we had on dirt bikes, because like that was kind of before hour meters. Like it'd be probably very eye-opening, like how many hours we put on, because little stupid things would break, like the silencer that's mounted to the subframe would just like, it would just break off the frame, that tab, because it's like, you just have so many hours on the bike. It's unbelievable. So I think there's 2 years where I just put my head down and just every night, like tried to put in a full 2 hour hare scramble. And I think that's when I went from like, 200A to right to double A. And then that first year double A ended up, winning the overall state championship. So I think it was definitely probably have some more natural talent, but it wasn't a lack of effort put in.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that effort, got you to something that I was very, very surprised to hear about, your experience racing Baja 500 and 1000. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, that was a fun time. So I had, like, with my work stuff too, like obviously I worked for Polaris Industries and started for Victory motorcycles, and now we discontinued the Victory brand, but we have Indian and Slingshot under our motorcycle umbrella. And just for work, we'd go out to Phoenix a lot, and I think that was about the time when we were developing the Slingshot, or just starting to. So I was spending a lot of time in Phoenix because we rent track time from like a lot of auto manufacturers. So like we were spending a lot of time at Ford in Phoenix, and I had a buddy that lives there that I used to work with here when we were in Wisconsin at the time. So I just left a dirt bike out there at his house. So I'd fly in and I'd normally like spend an extra weekend with him, and we'd jump on the dirt bike. We'd go ride deserts or hit a moto track, or sometimes hit a race. So I met with one of his friends, and he liked the desert a little bit more than my buddy at the time. He was more moto and I was more desert. So we were riding together, and he's like, we should hit this dirt bike race. So we went to this race, and we did it together, and it was so much fun. He was about the same speed as me, so we were swapping back and forth, and eventually at the end of the day, I got him in a section, so I ended up beating him, and I don't think he realized, that I had, that much speed. So we were kind of joking back and forth, and he's like, you should come with us on, to Baja this year. I think we need another rider. I was like, no way, you're kidding. Like, yeah, no, come with. Because this was after I did the 6 days, and the Baja was on my kind of like, if I had a bucket list, it was on it. So I'm like, for sure, I'm in. You let me know what I need to do, who I need to pay off, anything. So he invited me on. I thought he was kind of joking, but it was like, for sure, like 2 weeks later, he gave me some information. I met the guy who was putting it together, and we got the ball rolling. So we started planning, and so I did Baja in 2010, and I was begging, borrowing, stealing vacation time because it's 2 weeks every time you go. So I didn't have enough vacation to do the 200, the 500, and the 1,000. So I kind of just banked my money on the 500 and the 1,000. I could have done all three that year because our team was doing that, but like I said, I just didn't have the vacation time. But I just shot for the 500 because I heard the 250 was pretty much 100% whoops, and it wasn't as fun as the 500 or the 1,000. So the 500, I think we went out there a week before, and we pre-run our sections. So since I was the green one on the team, I got the whoop section. So my section was about 40 miles of whoops, about knee deep. So that year, I was really nervous about it. I'm not a moto guy, but I can do whoops. So I went up to General Andrews, and there's one section behind like the west side of the freeway that was just like maybe a mile or two of whoops. So I'd go up there once a week and just pound those until I could almost till my shock was overheating. And then I'd come back home. So I wasn't afraid of whoops by the time I got there. So yeah, we went like about a week before, and we stayed in this house right in the bay, and it was just beautiful. The 500 was so much fun. We'd go out in the morning, like stop on the way out, have a breakfast right in Ensenada. You roll up to like a little breakfast taco stand, anything, just have breakfast, and then, or we'd make it at the house, and then roll out that day, go ride a section, you know, and then pack up, go to another section, ride it, because, you know, it wasn't that big, not compared to like 1,000. So it was doable. We'd ride everybody's section so that there's always 2 people in the truck. You know, we would never leave 1 person in the truck for safety reasons. And then, you know, we'd have at least 3 people, 2 for sure, but a lot of times we'd like to have 3 people, you know, in the groups on bikes. So we'd go ride a section, and then just kind of throughout the week we jumped and made sure we rode every section. So you kind of had it burnt into your memory of where were good lines and stuff like that. And it's a little different. Like here you try to remember a line in a hare scramble, like for me, and it seems like it takes me about 3 laps to remember it. But there you had to kind of, you know, for your own safety, you had to really memorize the trail. So we do that, but every night we'd go back into Ensenada and just stop at a taco place and have beers and taco and hang out, sleep, wake up, do it again. It was like a dream. It was so much fun. Yeah, so then it came to race day during the 500, and we took off. We watched the start, and then we jumped in a truck and took off and tried to get to my section. Mine was, I think, the next one. So took off, drove there. Well, there's all these military checkpoints in the Baja, so they were backing everybody up, and we couldn't get there. And we for sure were going to miss our exchange. So we had our pre-runner in the back of the truck. So I just, on the side of the road in this long line, just threw on all my gear, unloaded the pre-runner, filled it up, and I just went down the ditch, pulled up to the military guys and said, "Can I go?" And they're like, waved me through. And I was like, I had to go 40 miles on pavement. So here's the pre-runner going down the road, like 40 miles, and I'm tucked in, so I'm not getting wore out, but I'm nervous, so nervous. And I basically get there. I have bugs all over my goggles. I get there, and he's like, where is everybody? Because there was one guy waiting there already for the exchange. And I literally took my goggles off, went to clean them, and I think I drank a little bit of Gatorade, and our bike came in. So I basically threw them on, threw my leg over, and I didn't even take my helmet off yet. And then I had my 40 miles of whoops. So I had no arm pump because I was already on the bike for 40 miles on the highway to get there.
Right.
So yeah, I pounded out those whoops, and it was brutal. It was literally 40 miles of whoops. So I'd go in the whoops for a while until my back started burning and my legs were on fire, and you jump into the desert, dodge cactus for a while, and then jump back on into the whoops and pound some more. And then luckily our truck was there at the next change. So I jumped in the truck and pounded waters, and I had one more section after that. So we dove across the desert to get to that section. And then I got ready for that one. By that time I was kind of hydrated again, had something to eat. And it was really cool because you hear the announcers like talking of where everybody's at, and the bikes always start in front of the trophy trucks. So it's not that big of a deal. Like you don't want to mix the two, right? You don't want a truck to land on you or anything like that, but it is a little nerve wracking because I had a second to last section. This one wasn't as whooped out, but it was pretty technical. A lot of desert were up and down and some washouts and things like that. So I was sitting there waiting for the handoff, and you could hear them on the radio that the first trophy truck is 20 miles out and it's clocked at 140 miles an hour. So me never being in this race before, my eyes are like huge, and I'm like, I'm gonna get run over. So I was like, whatever I do, I didn't want to crash, but I wanted to go as fast as I could. So I finally got the bike, blazed it to the next handoff, and handed the bike off to the next rider, because we had 5 of us on the team, I think, at that time. And we did a couple exchanges. So I handed the bike off, and all he had to do was finish, and he tipped over once or twice. It was so close, but we ended up winning the 500 in our class. So
nice.
it was a blast. And then we hung out and partied in Ensenada, and it was a good time.
That's awesome.
So that was the 500.
How did the 1,000 go?
The 1,000 it was more like what I would call a work trip, like what we have here. It's like it's fun, but it's work all day, the whole day. Even though it's fun, it's a lot of work because that year it was a point to point. So we did from Ensenada to La Paz. So it was like 1,061 miles, something like that. And they gave me the start, just because I did so well during the normal race. And the buddy that got me into it, he actually broke his hand. So we were down one rider. So I think we were still at about 5 because we were supposed to have 6, but another guy dropped off. So I did the start. But when we were pre-running, it was way harder because now you have to pre-run your section, but you're stretched out over 1,000 miles for 5 people. And to kind of keep in mind how big of an effort this is, we had 6 chase trucks and 13 people.
Wow.
Because, again, you want to pre-run your section, try to remember it, which my section was 305 miles. So I wanted to pre-run it and remember it. But at the same time, you never wanted to run it alone, and you never wanted to leave one person alone in the truck. So in 1 week, it's very hard to cram in 1,000 miles to make sure there's 2 people in the chase truck and there's 2 people in the desert, pre-running, and then get fuel the whole time. Like it's a logistical nightmare. Like there's a lot of planning. Like my hat's off to Matt, one of the guys who was planning it. It was tough. And I was really glad we had sponsors and stuff, and they covered the majority of the cost. But we went to start, so I had the start. So that night, I didn't sleep at all. I was so nervous. Like I was really nervous. So I was like thinking of temperatures, stuff like that, because we started at like I think I went off the line at 7. I think they started at 6, and it's like, I don't know, 50 degrees in the desert, in the morning. Mm-hmm. So you're taking off and you're going directly into the sun, so you're worried about, your vision, and I started with a jacket. So I slept maybe an hour that night. So I was so nervous. But we took off in Ensenada, and it's so much fun. Like there's people just scattered down the streets in all of Ensenada, and then you go in the washout and there's people scattered along there during the big jump, in the washout where you see all the trophy trucks just skying it out. So going down the streets, I was doing this wheelie show. It was kind of fun because there's people scattered up and down the road and the highway. So I just rode a wheelie as far as I could because they're all screaming, and it's so fun. Because you can go wide open through Ensenada because there's unlimited speed there, where other places there's speed checks. But so I took off, and I think we took off in about 57th overall because we were behind the pro bike class, and then we were behind the pro ATVs. And I started one guy behind that in our class. So we took off, and I had to switch at Coco's Corner. Like I said, it was about 305 miles, I think was my section. So we took off, and right away I passed that first guy in the sand wash before we even got out of the city. But the ATVs were a pain because they create so much dust, and you're going directly into the sun because we're going west out of Ensenada. East out of Ensenada, and you're going directly into the sun. So it took a long time to pass those, and you're trying to be careful, not hit a washout, wreck the whole race, in the first section. Excuse me. And so I was picking off ATV guys for a while, and then eventually started getting some clear air after 100, 150 miles. And then I could actually, push pretty hard. So we did pretty good. Got through a bunch of sections. I hit one booby trap because they always talk about the booby traps. And it was they always told me, like everybody told me, even during the 500, like you see people in the middle of the desert, you know, like they don't look like they belong there, and there's something funny, just check up on speed. Well, you're used to going so fast for so long. Like I did check up. I slowed down to about 50 miles an hour because I saw like 3 or 4 guys on the side of the road next to this minivan, and there was a dark line across the road. It was kind of like we were on this old gravel road. So I checked up to about 50. Well, what they did was they shoveled about 3 feet of dirt onto the road, onto a flat road. And I hit it at 50, and I did the whole like endo, like on the front wheel. And it felt like I was going on the front wheel for like quarter mile. And I thought I was going to flip forward, but eventually it went back down. And I just kind of turned around and I gave them the international sign and took off. So, yeah, I went for quite a while, until I hit a dry lake bed, and I actually hit some whoops and went down in some sand. So I think I wasted maybe about 30 seconds or a minute there. Got back up and jumped on the dry lake bed, and it's like maybe, I don't know, 20 miles across or something like that. So our bike did about 100 miles an hour. So I was full tuck for about 100 miles an hour, and for about 15 minutes straight. And all of a sudden I started like feeling, I thought there were ants biting me on the back of the leg. Like I thought I crashed on an ant pile. So I was like, oh, stupid things, but I was like, I just ignored them and just full tuck behind the bars and on the throttle stop for like literally 15 minutes. So I was hoping the engine didn't blow up either. And I ended up making it through there, went through a whoop section. After that was all rock by San Felipe, and then got to my handoff. And when I handed the bike off, we went from 57th overall, and I handed off at 7th overall. So we were way up into the pros, and it was pretty sweet because I was matching a bunch of the pro bike times through some sections, and I was pretty happy with myself. But unfortunately, during the very first, I noticed that our speedo wasn't working. We didn't know why right away, but later on we figured out that the charging system broke like immediately. Like there was something faulty with it. So that ended up in the end, like, you know, we couldn't run through the night with our lights because we had problems there. But I found out, like, once I got off the bike and I handed the bike off, I looked at the rear tire and I thought it was ants biting me, like, in my pants, but it was the knobs coming off because the off-road tires aren't used to 100 miles an hour sustained. So all the knobs are coming off and hitting me in the back of the leg. And I ended up keeping that tire and mounting it in my garage because it's like, it's cool. It's like all these dirt bike knobs on the side, but the ones down the center are just all like ripped off and flung off. It looks really cool, so I kept it.
That's awesome.
But yeah, we handed the bike off. The next guy drove into the night, but we couldn't keep going. So we ended up, you know, having problems throwing batteries at it, not knowing what it was. It was actually charging. So we ended up finishing, I think we finished 5th overall with, you know, a finish, which is a big deal because you're on the bike for 30 hours or somebody's on the bike for 30 hours. I was on it for, I want to say 7 hours was my stint. And the only time I ever stopped was just to fuel, and it was all dry brake. So it's quick, 30 seconds for fuel stop. So it was a long day. Mm-hmm. But that was a very cool, like, just experience. Like you're hanging right next to like the McMillan team and, you know, Robbie Gordon and stuff like that. You're hanging next to their pit guys and you're talking to them. They've got helicopters in the air, you know, and we're just on the ground with toolboxes and spare tires. So there's a big difference there of you know, different players in the game. It's really cool experience. I want to go back still, and we've been trying to get people to go back down riding the same guys, but we just haven't put it together yet. We will.
That's awesome. So it sounds like Baja was an incredible experience for you, but before we got started with the whole story of it all, you mentioned ISD. When did you go? How did it go for you?
Uh, 2004, went to Poland that year. There was a couple guys that I raced with locally. Dylan, he went the same year, so it was a lot of fun. That was a really good experience too. That was like my first like blown away experience because I guess like growing up in Minnesota, I didn't know any different. Like I used to ride road ditches a lot. Like I know it sounds funny, but it was like that was kind of my motocross experience was road ditches. Like as a kid, I was playing up and down the road ditches, and people used to get mad and chase you off their lawn. So like I knew who I couldn't go across their ditch. I'd go up on the highway and kind of sneak by as nice as I can, and then go back down and keep going. So there's always like people like mad at you for riding, trying to close riding areas and stuff like that. And when I went to Poland there, it was like if you raced, you were a god. It was so unbelievable. It was like, like you're going to a different country and there's I don't know 600 people there during this race, and people knew your name. Like you had a USA jacket on, and if I had my number, they were like, they would pronounce my name, and they're like just asking for autographs, and it was a very cool feeling. It was kind of like Baja, I talked about Baja is like all the kids there. It's like stickers were like gold. Like if you wanted something done, you could give them money, of course, and that would work. But stickers were actually higher currency than than money. We're like at the ISD, it was kind of the same thing. It was just like everybody looked up to you, and it was just such an awesome experience. They made a really big deal of it, kind of like the Baja where you started in Ensenada, and it's a big deal and it's a big party. They do the same thing in ISD. It's like they do kind of like a fake start, and the first day, so we went out of I think it was Kelsey, and it was just like I don't know 100,000 people just strung along the whole interstate that we drove down. They shut down the interstate, and it was another wheelie fest. We're just driving wheelies down the interstate, like everybody's cheering. So it's like, well, what do you do? I just rip a wheelie. He started riding wheelies, and it was good. And then race day started the next day, and we took it very serious. Pushed really hard, and unfortunately, my bike broke. So, and it was something silly. It was just like an exhaust mount on the subframe, but I didn't know how to fix it at the time. So I replaced the whole subframe, and it was during time. So I ended up losing a whole bunch of time. I was on gold, and then fell back to silver because I lost like 60 route points on changing out this subframe. If you know how the ISDs work, there's so much time you get to work on your bike. So I lost a bunch of route points, so I fell back to silver. But it was actually kind of a good thing because then I started to not care. I'm like, because otherwise I was kind of tiptoeing around the special tests. Well, then after I did that, I kind of like, whatever happens, happens. So I started riding more like the Europeans, like up on the foot pegs, sitting on the gas tank, and just wide open sliding, like flat tracking around the corners and blowing up berms and stuff like that. So I actually like my times really improved, and I started getting into the top 10 and or top 20 up to maybe the top 10 in some of the special tests. And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. So once I started not caring about my equipment, it started getting faster.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was just so cool because you'd be riding along just the beautiful countryside, and out in the middle of nowhere, there's just still people just lined up and cheering your name. Like they look at the number and they know your name, so they're cheering for you. And you run across, you think that there's somebody sitting on the porch and like they're gonna come running after you with a rake, but no, they come running out and cheer you on.
Mm-hmm.
You think that they want to be out, keep you off their lawn and stuff like that, but they just think you're a god, which is completely opposite of the U.S. At the time. So that was the big cool factor there. So I ended up, finishing strong even after changing that part. So I ended up finishing on a silver, which was cool, and it did good. Felt good about the results, but man, it was a long week, and you find out, if you can make it that long. So it was cool, and I ended up practicing tire changes and all those things for like a long time. I want to say if it was for like a year or two, because I had my tire changes down to I could do a front and a rear in 2 minutes.
Nice.
So because I was worried about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got that stuff down.
Yeah. Can you still?
No, but I could practice. Maybe get back to that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty cool. How do you feel seeing all these like uh, quote young kids, people my age, going off from D23 and having these similar experiences like you've had?
I think it's really cool. Like other people have talked about it. I think in Minnesota, in our District 23, I think we have a special area. It's like there's something in the water. We have some really fast people around here, so it's really cool to see, and it's cool to see people going out and still doing these things. Like in the last couple of years, a bunch of guys still go. Further and Swenson, those guys have still been pulling the rope on the ISDE, which is cool to see, and those guys do really good. They're fast guys, so it's kind of keeps me happy to be in the district, and a lot of people say that our district is really good and it's solid, and I think it's because of all the efforts everybody puts in to keep rules and stuff consistent and things like that. We strive really hard for keeping those things in, and I think in the end a lot of people drive to Minnesota to race, and it keeps the local talent higher. Mm-hmm. And I think that helps and drives a lot of that competition and the talent that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've touched on it a little bit here, but you're not only involved in the sport as a racer, but through your career with Polaris and your volunteering here in D23 ARMCA. Share a little bit more about those two aspects of your life.
Yeah, so Polaris has been a lot in my life, kind of the same, like racing. Started for Polaris in '97 on the Victory project before we were in production, and brought that thing to production. So it was pretty cool. So I think my riding got me into Polaris, and then my riding and Polaris is they both have complemented each other a lot over the years. So it was just funny. It's like, I was a young kid, like 21 years old when I started, and get thrown right in, because we were a small group. I think there was like maybe 30, 35 people in all of Victory Engineering, like engine, purchasing, everybody. Like it was crazy. So we were a small group, and it was a lot of fun because it was like the wild, wild west, where as much time and effort you could throw at it to try to get the vehicle out to production. So we were doing anything. And I think it was in the first 6 months, they were like, do you want to go to California? Sure. So do you want to drive the truck and trailer out to California? If you want, you can bring your dirt bike. This is awesome. Like, and you're going to pay me? And then they're like, yeah, you could be on, we'll give you money for food, and we'll pay for your hotel. I'm like, really? Like, do I have to come back? So it was just so awesome, like the experiences. So we went out to California. We were doing testing out there, and we did tons of stuff. Like over the years, I've had my hand in almost every part of motorcycle development. So doing like suspension tuning, tire testing, stability testing, engine calibration, lots of stuff. I've kind of touched almost every part of the aspect of the vehicle, brake testing, and it was a lot of fun. Learned a lot of things, met a lot of people. So it is kind of cool, like all the opportunities that I got. And like first time I was ever on a plane was started working with Polaris, and I was like, this is awesome. You get to fly around the country, do things, ride at tracks. And, over the years, I've probably ridden at, over half of either the racetracks or proving grounds in the U.S. And, even flown overseas and did some testing over in like Spain at IDIATA, things like that. So it's kind of cool. We do have a lot of relationships with automotive proving grounds. So we go to different proving grounds there or different racetracks. And a lot of driving schools too. So that's the fun part of my job is when we're developing the slingshot, I did a lot of driving for that. So I did like the Ford Tier 3, driving school because we were testing at Ford at the time. So got to do that. It was really cool. Some cool experiences. A little funny story there is the guy I was going with, we're both getting Tier 3 license for Ford. So which means that you can just drive above limit on their tracks. So you can have the vehicle above tire limit or above vehicle limit. So to go through the training is you take a front wheel drive automatic car and you go through this steering and handling course and a wet VD8 course. And you have to beat a Tier 4 driver, which is their highest level of driver, which basically means they can just drive anything. So you have to be within, well, not beat them, but you have to be within 10% of their time. So I was driving this front wheel drive car, and the guy I was with, he actually broke the car. So he took the car out, so we needed a new one. And then we took out this Mustang. He broke that car, and he had his own Tier 4 driver, and I had my own Tier 4 driver. And I was working really hard to stay within 10% of my Tier 4 driver, and I was beating his driver's time. And he broke the car, so we had to take one of their high-end Mustangs that was very powerful and hard to drive around this track. So it was just very cool over the years, all the stuff I've been able to do, like developing slingshot, developing all the models that we've had through Victory and Indian, all the travel, people I've met over the years, just relationships. It's very cool. So I couldn't thank, Polaris enough. And like I said, it's just so many opportunities. It was a blast.
That's awesome. And your involvement with D23 ARMCA, you are a board member. So tell us about what you do.
Yeah, so there, I'm on the budget committee, chairperson for the budget committee. I started out I have a problem with saying no a lot of times, so I was thrown into the off-road position first. Did that for a little bit, and I guess I kind of starting to give back, to the sport for all the things I've been able to do over the years. So started with that off-road position for hare scramble rep. And I guess what I did there is I kind of tried to help refine certain things like the moto tally a little bit and any procedures and things that person would be doing. So I documented all that and tried to make it transparent so the next person that comes along, you can hand this off and say, hey, this is what this person does. So then I was asked to be on the budget committee. I did that for a little bit, and then I was asked to be the chair. So, and I don't see myself as a procedures person, but we do a lot at work, and I'm proficient enough to do some. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do there to help out and give back. Is I try to see what we're doing, see what we could do better, and document and try to make things a little more transparent and try to make things consistent and protect ourselves as the district, so that we have lots of checks and balances and just really protect ourselves for the future, the new riders coming up.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all your hard work on behalf of me and the board.
Yeah, thank you.
Final question for you. Looking forward to the future in racing, in life, what does it look like?
Probably more of a backseat, and if my my youngest son wants to keep racing. Both boys, race for a little bit. We were in hockey and dirt biking, but my oldest, he's more into, he's a runner, so he's more into track and cross country. He loves doing that. But my youngest is staying in it, and if he wants to continue staying in it, then I can foresee myself as a full-time mechanic and pit person. So I'll stay after it for a while, but eventually it'll be kind of fun to just enjoy more of it from the sidelines. Mm-hmm. It is pretty cool right now. Like, he'll race the 85 class, and then he's been racing junior C as well. So I'll quickly try to get ready for my race, because I get like an hour in between. So I'm trying to get ready for me, but at the same time, pit him and support him. And it's a lot of fun right now. But I think in the future, it'll be kind of more of a pit person.
Get back to those 2-minute tire changes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's awesome, Kyle. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for sharing your story here with us on The Roots. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure's all mine.
And thank you, everybody else, for joining us. We'll see you in a couple weeks for another episode of The Roots. But hey, before we go, a quick thank you to Fly Racing, Spring Creek MX Park, Burnbenders Raceway, and The Shed Shop. Thanks for joining us. Catch us every other Monday wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on our YouTube page.